The biggest benefit of this lens brings with it its biggest drawback. I'll get into what I mean by this during my review of the TT Artisan's 90mm f1.25, using it on the SL2-S. I never had a true 90mm lens before. I do have my 60mm Apo Macro TL lens, and when I put that on the SL2-S, it converts to APS-C mode, so the lens converts to a 90, but it loses some megapixel resolution, so I think it crops down from a 24 megapixel to somewhere around 18. It's an autofocus lens and fairly lightweight at 355 grams, but it doesn't have a wide aperture. It's a 2.8, so not great for low light capability. And my other telephoto option is the 75mm Apo Summicron M, which I can use on the SL2-S using an adapter. It produces some beautiful images. It has a slightly wider aperture at f2.0, so it's good for low light, and it has a great bokeh effect and subject separation. I wanted to try out a true 90mm lens. The Leica 90mm are very expensive, so I got this one from TT Artisans just to get a taste of what a Noctilux might feel like without the $14,000 Noctilux price tag. This one comes in at $769 at retail, and I bought this used one at $385. It's in perfect condition, it feels like new, and I don't really see any defects with this lens. The f1.25 is an interesting maximum aperture. It's not f1.2, it's not f1.4, it's f1.25. The lens diameter is extremely large, and with this large aperture you get the extremely shallow depth of field, which gives you that great subject separation and bokeh effect. And with that large lens diameter, it brings in a lot of light, so this should perform well in low light situations, especially with the SL2-S. And with that being its greatest benefit, it brings with it its greatest drawback. With that extremely thin, shallow plane of focus, it's very difficult to get the focus just right, even using the SL2-S with its focus assistance. And when I did get the focus right, the center was not even all that sharp when shooting wide open. And the second biggest drawback is fitting in all those optics into the lens housing. This results in a lens that's very big and very heavy. It looks almost as big as the 24-70 SL lens, and the weight comes in at just under 1.1 kilograms. And putting it on the SL2-S body, that puts the total weight at almost 2 kilograms. Not something comfortable to be carrying around all day. But I have to admit the build quality is excellent. It has an all-metal housing and it feels very sturdy. The lens hood is stored in reverse position on the lens, and if you want to mount the lens hood, you pull off the lens hood, reverse it, and screw it back on. The lens cap is also metal and it's also screw-on. The aperture ring clicks feel just fine, but it is manual focus, and the focus ring is slightly tight, but that may loosen up over time. So when I took some of my photos to get the right focus, I ended up just moving my body closer or farther away rather than moving the focus ring. Going into some sample photos, I like the final result of this photo. The colors are pleasing and the text on the boat is sharp, and this shows the gradual focus fall off. And this shot again is showing how this lens can blur out the background. And the next two photos shot at middle distance, you can also blur out some of the foreground in addition to blurring out the background. And some more photos shot at f1.25. I had to take my time getting the focus right. I used the magnified view, and like I said, I got the focus at estimation, and then to get the fine focus, I just moved the camera forward or backwards. I've still had a lot of misses, but these were the best ones I managed to get that day. But even so, I still felt like the center was not extremely sharp. If you crop in on this image, you can see that the text on the dial is still not sharp, and that was the area that I was trying to get into focus. And on these next two photos, I used the wide aperture to blur out some of the foreground trees or leaves, and just to put focus on the house or structures in the background. It's almost like a framing effect, using the trees in the foreground to frame the background. I think the point of this lens is to shoot wide open, but you can still stop down, so these next two images were shot at f8. So my final conclusions, this lens has a great build quality. I like the colors that it produces, and I like that background blurring and the subject separation. But the drawbacks of this lens are just too great compared to the positives. I think I'll keep this around for a couple more weeks to play around with it some more, but I don't think it's going to stay in my final collection, and it will probably go back up for sale. The difficulty in focusing is not worth the time and effort for me, and I'm risking getting a lot of missed photos. And the other big negative is how heavy this lens is. Adding it to the SL2-S body comes in at almost 2 kilograms, and I'm not willing to lug around that extra weight on a trip. So this is going to stay close to home, and it probably wouldn't get enough use to be worth it. So I'll stay with my 60mm Apo Macro Elmarit TL lens when I want to get a 90mm field of view. And if I need better low light capability or better bokeh, I'll go with my 75mm Apo Summicron. I shot these two images with my 75mm Apo Summicron M, and I'm happy with the background blurring on these and the subject separation, and I love how the colors come out with this lens. But if you just want to try out a super fast 90mm lens, and you're better at focusing than I am, and you don't want to spend $14,000 on a Leica Noctilux, then I think this TT Artisans is a good option. Buying it used, you can try it out for a while, and you could sell it for most of your money back if you don't like it.